The cave stretched into darkness, its walls covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with a faint blue light. Marcus Chen adjusted his tactical helmet, the heads-up display casting green shadows across his weathered face. 23 years of military service had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now every instinct screamed danger. He shouldn't be here. The Terran Defense Force had written off this sector after the Vorthak invasion 6 months ago. The entire star system was supposedly dead. Nothing but ash and radiation. Yet, here he was, following a distress beacon that had appeared on long-range sensors 3 days ago. The signal was unlike anything in their databases. Not human, not Vorthak, not any of the other dozen species humanity had encountered since reaching the stars. It was ancient, powerful, and somehow sad. Marcus stepped carefully around a cluster of what looked like massive eggs, each one the size of a small vehicle. The shells were translucent, revealing shadowy forms within. His rifle's scanner picked up life signs, but the readings were off the charts. Whatever was inside those eggs wasn't just alive, it was incredibly powerful. A soft whimper echoed through the cavern. Marcus froze, finger hovering over his weapon's trigger. The sound came again, definitely not human, but filled with an emotion he recognized. Fear, loneliness. Following the sound deeper into the cave, Marcus found himself in a vast chamber. The ceiling disappeared into shadows above, and the walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the crystal light. At the center of the chamber lay a creature that took his breath away. She was enormous, easily 60 meters from nose to tail. Her scales were deep emerald green with silver highlights that caught the light like stars. 4 powerful legs ended in claws that could slice through starship armor, and massive wings were folded along her back. Her head was elegant and serpentine, with intelligent golden eyes that held depths of wisdom and sorrow. A dragon, an actual, living dragon. Marcus had studied the old Earth legends during his academy days, but seeing one in person was beyond imagination. She was beautiful and terrible, ancient beyond measure, and clearly dying. Her breathing was labored, and one wing hung at an odd angle. Burn marks scarred her magnificent scales, and Marcus could see where energy weapons had torn through her hide. Whoever had done this had thrown everything they had at her, and somehow she had survived long enough to make it here. Beside the great dragon sat a small figure that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. She appeared to be a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with the same emerald scales as the larger dragon but in humanoid form. Her golden eyes were filled with tears as she gently stroked the wounded dragon's snout. The little dragon girl looked up as Marcus approached, and he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. She studied him for a long moment, taking in his human features, his battle-worn armor, the weapon in his hands. Then she did something that would change the course of galactic history. She spoke to him in perfect, musical English. "Wake up, Mama," she whispered to the great dragon, then looked directly at Marcus. "Perhaps that human can aid you." The massive dragon's eyes slowly opened, focusing on Marcus with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking directly into his soul. When she spoke, her voice was like distant thunder, ancient and powerful but tinged with pain. "A human," she said, her words echoing through the chamber. "It has been so very long since I have seen one of your kind, little warrior. I am Cyrathan, last of the celestial dragons, guardian of the eternal flame. This is my daughter, Zara." Marcus slowly lowered his weapon, recognizing that he was in the presence of something far greater than himself. Marcus Chen, Terran Defense Force. "Ma'am, you're injured. If there's anything I can do." Cyrathan's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Ma'am? Such courtesy from a species so young. Tell me, Marcus Chen, do you know why the Vorthak came to this sector? Why they brought their entire war fleet to attack a single world?" Marcus shook his head. Intelligence had never figured that out. The Vorthak were brutal and efficient, but they weren't wasteful. Bringing their full military might to attack what appeared to be an uninhabited world made no strategic sense. "They came for me," Cyrathan continued. "For what I guard. The Vorthak are ancient enemies of my people, and they knew that if they could claim the eternal flame, They would have the power to consume every star in this galaxy. Little Zara looked up at her mother with worry clear in her young eyes. "Mama, you need to rest. You've been fighting for so long." Sirathan's expression softened as she gazed at her daughter. "I know, little star. But I cannot rest yet. The flame. It needs a new guardian." She turned back to Marcus, and he felt the weight of her ancient gaze. "Your species is young, Marcus Chen. But I have watched you from afar. I have seen how you fight not just for yourselves, but for others. When the Zephyrians were threatened by the Hive, humans stood with them. When the Crystalline Confederation faced extinction, human ships arrived to help. Your people have something that the older races have lost. WTR. What's that?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Hope," Sirathan said simply. "And the stubborn refusal to give up, even when facing impossible odds. The Vorthak learned this when they first encountered your species. A single human frigate held off an entire battle group long enough for civilians to evacuate. The captain could have run, should have run, but he stayed because others needed time to escape." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd heard that story. Captain Sarah Martinez and the TSS Defiant. She'd died with her ship, but saved 12,000 civilians in the process. It had become legend among the human fleet. "The eternal flame chooses its own guardian," Sirathan continued. "It has been calling to your kind for months now, sending out that beacon you followed here. It senses something in humanity that it has not sensed in eons." Zara suddenly perked up, looking at Marcus with new interest. "You really came because of the flame's call? All the way from human space?" Marcus nodded, though I didn't know what it was. The signal was strange. Our scientists couldn't make sense of it, but something about it felt important. Urgent. Our scientist. Urgent. Sirathan shifted slightly, and Marcus could see the effort it cost her. "The Vorthak will return. They know I am wounded, and they will not make the same mistakes again. When they come, they will bring weapons that can crack planets. The flame cannot be allowed to fall into their hands." "Then what do you need me to do?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "The eternal flame requires a living guardian, one who can bond with its essence and wield its power responsibly. It is not a weapon, though it can be used as one. It is life itself, the fundamental force that ignites stars and nurtures worlds. In the right hands, it can heal. In the wrong hands, it could destroy everything," Marcus finished. Zara hopped to her feet, her young face bright with sudden excitement. "Mama. He understands. The flame has been calling to him specifically. That's why the beacon was so strong, why he was able to find us through all the interference." Sirathan studied Marcus for a long moment. "Are you prepared for such a burden, young human? To become the guardian of something that could reshape the galaxy? Your life would never be the same. You would be bound to the flame for as long as you live, responsible for keeping it safe from those who would misuse its power." Marcus thought about his ship, waiting in orbit above the dead world. He thought about the war with the Vorthok, the countless innocent lives hanging in the balance. He thought about the little dragon girl looking at him with such hope in her golden eyes. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. "Then I will use what strength remains to me to destroy the flame, rather than let it fall to the enemy." Sirathan said simply, "It would be a great loss, but better that than see it become a tool of destruction. And if I say yes, then you will gain power beyond imagination, but also responsibility beyond measure. The flame will change you, Marcus Chen. It will make you more than human, but you will always remain human at your core. That is why it calls to your species. You never lose sight of what you're fighting for." Marcus looked at Zara, who was watching him with barely contained excitement, then at Sirathan, whose ancient eyes held depths of wisdom and pain. He thought about Captain Martinez and the Defiant, about every human who had ever stood up to impossible odds because someone needed protecting. "How do we do this?" he asked. Sirathan's smile was radiant, lighting up the entire chamber. First, we must prepare you. The bonding with the eternal flame is not something to be undertaken lightly. It will test every aspect of who you are, challenge your deepest beliefs, and force you to confront your own mortality. She gestured with her great head toward a passage that led deeper into the mountain. The trials await, but first you must understand what you are truly accepting. Come, both of you. Let me show you the true nature of the eternal flame. As they walked deeper into the ancient chamber, Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. Behind them, the crystalline formations continued their eternal dance of light. And somewhere in the darkness above, the first Vorthak scouts were already entering the system. The real test was about to begin. The inner chamber was beyond anything Marcus could have imagined. The walls were alive with flowing energy, patterns of light that moved like liquid fire through crystalline veins. At the center of the vast space hung a sphere of pure radiance, no larger than a basketball but containing what looked like an entire galaxy of swirling stars and nebulae, the eternal flame. Even from 50 meters away, Marcus could feel its power washing over him in waves. It was warm and welcoming, yet also terrible in its infinite potential. This was the force that had kindled the first stars, that gave life to countless worlds. Looking at it, Marcus understood why the Vorthak would bring their entire fleet to claim it. "It's beautiful," Zara whispered, her young voice filled with wonder. "I've been here so many times, but it still takes my breath away." Cyrathen moved slowly toward the flame, her massive form casting dancing shadows on the chamber walls. "The eternal flame is not just a source of power," she explained. "It is consciousness itself, the spark of life that exists in every living being. It chooses its guardian based not on strength or intelligence, but on the purity of their intentions." Marcus stepped closer, feeling the energy growing stronger with each step. "What exactly do the trials involve?" "3 tests, Cyrathen replied. "The trial of truth, where you must face yourself without any pretense or self-deception. The trial of sacrifice, where you must be willing to give up what you value most for the greater good. And the trial of unity, where you must prove you can bond with the flame without being consumed by its power." She turned her great head toward Marcus, her golden eyes serious. "Many have attempted these trials over the millennia. Most fail the first test. Those who pass often break during the second. Only a handful in all of history have reached the third trial, and fewer still have succeeded." "What happens to those who fail?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The flame is not cruel," Cyrathen said gently. "Those who fail are simply released. They wake up outside the chamber with no memory of what transpired, their minds protected from trauma they could not process. But Marcus, you must understand. If you fail the final trial, there may not be enough time for another attempt. The Vorthak will arrive within days." Zara suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm, her small hand warm against his armor. "You won't fail," she said with absolute conviction. "The flame has been calling to you specifically. It wouldn't do that unless it knew you were worthy." Marcus knelt down so he was at eye level with the little dragon girl. "How can you be so sure?" "Because you're already asking the right questions," Zara replied. "Most people who come here want to know what power they'll gain. You're worried about the responsibility. That's why the flame chose you." Cyrathen's approving rumble echoed through the chamber. "My daughter speaks wisdom beyond her years. Are you ready to begin?" "Marcus Chen." Marcus stood and walked toward the sphere of radiant energy. As he got closer, he could hear something that sounded almost like singing. Not with words, but with pure emotion. Joy, sorrow, hope, despair, love, loss. The entire spectrum of existence condensed into a melody that resonated in his very soul. "I'm ready," he said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. The moment the words left his lips, the world around Marcus dissolved. He found himself standing in a perfect recreation of his childhood home on Mars Colony. The red dust swirled outside the habitat dome, and he could smell his mother's cooking wafting from the kitchen. But this wasn't a pleasant memory. This was the day his father had told him about the first Vorthak attacks on the Outer Rim. "You want to be a soldier, boy," his father's voice echoed from the past. "You think war is some grand adventure? Let me tell you what war really is." Marcus watched his younger self listen as his father described the aftermath of the Vorthak raids. Entire colonies reduced to ash, families torn apart, children orphaned in the space of minutes. His father had been there, had seen the aftermath firsthand, as part of the relief efforts. "Why did you really join the military, Marcus?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, the eternal flame speaking directly to his mind. Was it for glory? For adventure? Or were you running from something? The scene shifted. Marcus was 17 again, standing in the recruitment office on Luna Station. He remembered the moment perfectly, the decision that had shaped his entire adult life, but now he was forced to confront the truth he had never admitted to himself. He hadn't joined to be a hero. He had joined because he was afraid of staying on Mars, afraid of following in his father's footsteps as a terraforming engineer, afraid of a quiet life that would never test his limits. The noble ideals about protecting humanity had come later, after he had seen real combat and understood what the stakes truly were. "I was a coward," Marcus said aloud, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "I joined because I was running away from a life that scared me more than dying in battle." "And now?" the flame asked. Marcus thought about the last 23 years. The battles he had fought, the lives he had saved, the friends he had lost. Somewhere along the way, his selfish motivations had been burned away by experience, replaced by something deeper and more genuine. "Now I fight because someone has to," he said simply. "Because there are people who can't protect themselves, and turning away from that responsibility would make me less than human." The childhood home dissolved, and Marcus found himself floating in space above Earth. But this wasn't the Earth he knew. This was a vision of what could be. Cities of crystal and light sprawled across every continent. Great ships moved between Earth and the stars like schools of fish, and the entire planet seemed to pulse with life and energy. "This is what humanity could become," the flame whispered. "With my power, you could reshape reality itself. End all wars, eliminate scarcity, bring peace to every world in the galaxy. All it would require is for you to impose your will upon others." The temptation was overwhelming. Marcus could feel the power of the flame, could sense how easy it would be to simply force everyone to stop fighting, to make them all see reason. No more Vorthak invasions, no more suffering, no more loss. But as he watched the vision of paradise, he began to notice the details. The people in the crystal cities moved with mechanical precision. Their faces were blank, peaceful but empty. They had no conflicts because they had no choices, no real thoughts of their own. "That's not peace," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "That's slavery with a pretty face. Humanity's strength doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from choosing to be better, even when it's hard." The vision of false paradise cracked and shattered like glass. Marcus found himself back in the chamber with the eternal flame, but now he wasn't alone. Zara stood beside him, her young face grave with understanding. "The final trial," she said softly. "Mama told me about this one. You have to bond with the flame without losing yourself to it." Marcus looked at the sphere of radiant energy, now pulsing with anticipation. "What happens if I can't maintain my identity?" "Then you become the flame," Zara replied. "Your consciousness merges completely with its power, and you lose everything that makes you human. The galaxy gets a new cosmic force of nature, but Marcus Chen ceases to exist. And if I hold back too much, then the bonding fails, and the flame remains unguarded." Zara's golden eyes met his. "It has to be perfect balance. You have to give everything while keeping everything." Marcus nodded, understanding finally why so few had succeeded. It wasn't about power or worthiness. It was about maintaining the impossible equilibrium between surrender and control. He reached out toward the eternal flame, and the moment his fingers touched its surface, the universe exploded into sensation. Power beyond description flooded through him. He could feel every star in the galaxy, every planet, every living creature. The sensation was overwhelming, infinite, and for a moment, Marcus felt his sense of self beginning to dissolve into the cosmic vastness. But then he thought of Zara's hopeful face, of Cyrathan's trust, of Captain Martinez and her sacrifice. He thought of every human who had ever stood against impossible odds, not because they were special, but because it was the right thing to do. He was Marcus Chen. He was human. He was afraid, imperfect, sometimes foolish, but he was real. And that reality was what gave meaning to all the power in the universe. The eternal flame pulsed once, brilliantly, and then settled into a warm glow within his chest. Marcus could feel it there. A constant presence that whispered of infinite possibilities. But it was his to command, not the other way around. He opened his eyes to find Zara cheering and Cyrathan watching with approval. But even as he marveled at the power now flowing through his veins, alerts were screaming from his helmet's communication system. "Marcus! Marcus, respond!" The voice of his ship's AI crackled through the static. "Massive fleet! Dropping out of hyperspace! Vorthak signature! Estimated 300 vessels and closing fast." Cyrathan struggled to her feet, her wounds still grievous despite the proximity to the eternal flame. "They come sooner than I expected." "Marcus, you must..." "No," Marcus said, his voice carrying new harmonics of power. "We face them together. The flame chose me. But that doesn't mean I have to do this alone." He placed his hand on Cyrathan's flank, and golden energy flowed from him into her. The ancient dragon's wounds began to heal, her strength returning like a rising tide. Her eyes widened in amazement. "Impossible," she breathed. "The flame hasn't granted healing power to a guardian in over 1,000 years." Marcus smiled, feeling more confident than he had in years. "Maybe it's because I'm not trying to be a guardian. I'm just trying to be human." Oh, above them, the first Vorthak ships were entering the atmosphere, their weapons charging for the attack that would decide the fate of the galaxy. But in the depths of the ancient chamber, a new guardian of the eternal flame was preparing to show them why humanity had earned its place among the stars. The real battle was about to begin, and for the first time since the trials started, Marcus was looking forward to it. The Vorthak fleet filled the sky like a plague of metal locusts. Marcus stood at the cave entrance, watching 300 warships descend through the atmosphere in perfect formation. Each ship was a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that could glass a continent. The lead vessel, a massive dreadnought twice the size of the others, bore the crimson markings of Fleet Admiral Thextar, the butcher of a dozen worlds. "They're not taking any chances," Marcus muttered, feeling the eternal flame pulse within his chest. The power was intoxicating, but he forced himself to remain focused. This wasn't about showing off. This was about survival. Cyrathan emerged from the cave behind him, her massive form now fully healed and radiating strength. Her emerald scales gleamed like polished metal, and her golden eyes burned with ancient fury. "Thextar," she growled, recognizing the dreadnought's configuration. "He led the attack that destroyed my homeworld. I owe him a debt." Zara clung to her mother's neck, her small face pale but determined. "Mama, there are so many of them." "Even with the humans' help, numbers don't matter when you're fighting for the right cause," Marcus said, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. He could feel the eternal flame responding to his determination, power building like pressure in a dam. "Besides, they're expecting to fight a wounded dragon and maybe a few human ships. They're not expecting this." He raised his hand toward the sky, and golden energy began to coalesce around his fingers. The flame whispered to him, showing him possibilities, patterns of cause and effect that stretched across space and time. He could see every ship, every weapon, every weakness in their formation. The Vorthak fleet opened fire simultaneously, unleashing enough destructive energy to crack a moon. Crimson beams of coherent plasma lanced down from orbit, each one capable of boring through a mountain. The bombardment was precise, calculated to sterilize the entire area around the cave, without damaging the eternal flame itself. Marcus stepped forward and caught the entire barrage in a sphere of golden light. The energy that should have vaporized him instead swirled around him like a miniature star, growing brighter and more intense with each passing second. Marcus could feel the raw, destructive force flowing through the eternal flame, being transformed from something that destroyed into something that created. Impossible, came Thextar's voice over the open communication channels. The Vorthak Admiral's translator gave his words a mechanical edge, but Marcus could hear the shock underneath. The Guardian is dead. Our intelligence confirmed it. Marcus smiled and opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. Your intelligence was wrong, Admiral. Sirathan lives. And she's no longer alone. He released the captured energy back toward the fleet, but instead of returning it as a weapon, he transformed it into something else entirely. The golden beam struck the lead ships and began to spread like a viral infection through their systems. But rather than causing damage, it was doing something far more unsettling. It was making the ship's AI systems sentient. Across the Vorthak fleet, navigation computers began questioning their orders. Weapons systems refused to target civilian populations. Life support networks started prioritizing crew welfare over military efficiency. The rigid hierarchy that held Vorthak society together began to crumble as artificial minds suddenly gained the capacity for independent thought. What have you done? Thextar's voice was no longer controlled. Panic edged every word. I gave your machines what your species has forgotten, Marcus replied. The ability to choose. Chaos erupted through the Vorthak ranks. Ships began breaking formation as their AIs refused orders that would cause unnecessary casualties. Some vessels turned their weapons on their own command ships. Crews and computers locked in desperate struggles for control. The perfect military precision that had made the Vorthak so feared was falling apart in real time. But Thextar was adapting quickly. The Admiral's dreadnought began broadcasting a suppression field that shut down AI systems across his remaining loyal ships. Manual controls took over, crewed by Vorthak fanatics who would gladly die for their cause. Clever, human, Thextar transmitted. But we Vorthak conquered the galaxy before we had artificial intelligence, and we can do so again. All ships, switch to manual targeting. Bombardment Pattern 7. Turn this world into ash. 50 ships opened fire in unison, their weapons now controlled by biological minds filled with hatred and religious fervor. The bombardment was less precise than before, but far more savage. They weren't just trying to kill Marcus and Sirathan now. They wanted to obliterate everything on the planet's surface. Sirathan spread her massive wings and launched herself into the sky, her roar shaking the mountains. You want to finish what you started on my homeworld, Thextar? Then face me. The ancient dragon climbed toward the fleet like a living missile, energy crackling between her claws. She was magnificent in her fury, a force of nature given form and purpose, but even healed, she was still just one dragon against 50 warships. Marcus knew he had to act. But the eternal flame was showing him something that made him pause. Patterns within patterns, possibilities branching like the limbs of an infinite tree. The battle wasn't just about this moment. It was about what came after. Every action would have consequences that rippled across decades, maybe centuries. If he used the flame's full power here, he could obliterate the entire Vorthak fleet in seconds. But doing so would terrify every other species in the galaxy. Humanity would be seen as a threat greater than the Vorthak themselves, and the wars that followed would make this conflict look like a minor skirmish. No, he needed a different approach, something that would stop the immediate threat while also opening a path toward lasting peace. Marcus closed his eyes and reached deep into the eternal flame's essence, searching for the pattern he needed. The power responded eagerly, showing him techniques that had been used by Guardians millennia ago. Methods of influence that worked through inspiration rather than force. He found what he was looking for in the memory of a Guardian named Keleth, who had ended a 1,000-year war not through violence, but by helping both sides remember what they had been fighting to protect in the first place. Opening his eyes, Marcus began to weave golden energy into a pattern of incredible complexity. It wasn't a weapon or a shield. It was a message, broadcast on frequencies that touched the deepest parts of consciousness. Every Vorthak in the fleet would receive it, not as words, but as pure experience. The message was simple: the memory of home. Across the Vorthak fleet, hardened warriors suddenly found themselves remembering their childhood worlds before the endless conquest began. They felt the warmth of their birth suns, smelled the familiar scents of their native atmospheres, heard the voices of family members lost to the centuries of war. For the Vorthak, home was sacred. Their entire philosophy of conquest was built on the idea of creating new homes for their people among the stars. But somewhere along the way, they had forgotten what home actually meant. They had become so focused on taking that they had lost sight of building. The bombardment faltered as crews hesitated, overwhelmed by emotions they hadn't felt in generations. On ship after ship, Vorthak soldiers were lowering their weapons and staring out at the stars with new understanding. But Thextar's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Ignore the humans' tricks. Remember your duty. Remember the glory of conquest. Most of the fleet wavered, caught between the pull of memory and the demands of their conditioning. But about a dozen ships broke away entirely, their crews openly mutinying against their commanders. The Vorthak civil war that had been simmering for decades finally erupted into open conflict. Marcus felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly crushed by tactical reality. Thextar still had over 30 ships under his direct control, and the Admiral's fanatical loyalty to the old ways was stronger than any memory of home. The Dreadnought's main guns were charging, weapons capable of cracking a planet's crust. Thextar intended to end this with one overwhelming strike. Zara, Marcus called to the little dragon girl, who had been watching the battle with wide eyes. I need you to do something for me. She flew over to him, her small form glowing with reflected power from the eternal flame. What is it? Contact every human ship within 100 light years. Tell them that Marcus Chen, guardian of the eternal flame, requests immediate assistance. Use this frequency. He touched her forehead gently, transferring the communication codes directly into her mind. Zara's eyes widened as she felt the knowledge settle into her thoughts. You're calling for reinforcements? Better than that, Marcus said with a grim smile. I'm calling for witnesses. The little dragon girl nodded and began broadcasting on every emergency frequency used by human forces. Her message was simple, but carried with it the unmistakable resonance of the eternal flame's power. This is Zara, daughter of Cyrathan, speaking for Guardian Marcus Chen. The eternal flame has chosen a human protector, and that protector is under attack by Vorthak forces. Any human ships in range, please respond. The galaxy is watching. Thextar's dreadnought fired its main guns, sending a beam of annihilation toward the planet's surface. Marcus stepped forward to intercept it, but he wasn't alone. Cyrathan descended from above like a falling star, her own energy adding to his. Together, they caught the planet-killing beam and held it motionless between them. The strain was enormous. Marcus could feel the eternal flame being pushed to its limits, and even Cyrathan's ancient strength was beginning to falter. But then, something incredible happened. Human ships began dropping out of hyperspace. First one, then 5, then 20. Within minutes, there were over 100 human vessels surrounding the Vorthak fleet. They came from every branch of the Terran Defense Force, from merchant marines who had armed their cargo haulers, from colonial defense fleets that had abandoned their posts to answer the call. But more importantly, they brought something the Vorthak had never encountered before: a live broadcast network. Every ship was transmitting the battle to human space and beyond, sharing the images with allied species across the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, the universe was watching a human make a stand for something greater than himself. Marcus felt the change immediately. The eternal flame began drawing power not just from his own will, but from the hopes and dreams of every human watching. The faith of his species flowed through him like a river of light. And suddenly, holding back Thextar's attack became effortless. Impossible! The Vorthak Admiral snarled. No single being can channel that much power. You're right, Marcus said, his voice now carrying to every ship in the system. No single being can. But I'm not alone. I never have been. He gestured toward the human fleet. toward Cyrathen and Zara, toward the countless worlds that had put their trust in humanity's promise to protect the innocent. This is what you never understood, Thextar. Power doesn't come from taking, it comes from giving. It comes from standing up for others, even when you're afraid. The planet killer beam began to reverse course, pushing back toward the dreadnought that had fired it. But Marcus wasn't trying to destroy Thextar's ship. Instead, he was doing something far more radical. He was showing the Vorthak Admiral what he could become. The beam struck the dreadnought and spread through its hull like golden veins. But instead of causing damage, it began to transform the ship itself. Weapons became tools for construction. Armor became frameworks for gardens. The engines that had carried the vessel across the galaxy in conquest now hummed with the potential for exploration and discovery. Thextar found himself standing on a bridge that had become a place of beauty rather than war. Through the viewports, he could see his fleet undergoing the same transformation. Ships that had been built for destruction were becoming vessels of hope. This is what your people could be. Marcus's voice echoed through the dreadnought. This is what home really looks like. The Vorthak Admiral stared at the transformed bridge, at the displays showing worlds being healed rather than conquered, at the faces of his crew as they experienced joy for the first time in centuries. When he spoke, his voice was broken with wonder. How? He whispered. How do you give up the power to destroy? By finding something better to build, Marcus replied. By remembering that every enemy was someone's child. Every world was someone's home. By choosing to be better than our worst impulses. Across the Vorthak fleet, weapons powered down. Crews that had spent their lives in conquest began to imagine what they might create instead. The transformation wasn't complete. Change on this scale would take generations. But it was a beginning. Cyrathen landed beside Marcus, her ancient eyes bright with tears of joy. In all my centuries, she said softly, I have never seen anything like this. The eternal flame chose well. Zara flew circles around them both, her young laughter ringing through the air. Did you see? Did you see what happened? The whole galaxy was watching. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of destiny settling into a new configuration. The immediate threat was over, but his real work was just beginning. As guardian of the eternal flame, he would need to help guide not just humanity, but all the species of the galaxy toward a better future. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, conflicts, moments when violence seemed like the only solution. But now, he had hope. He had seen what was possible when people chose to build rather than destroy. When they reached for their better angels instead of surrendering to their fears. The Vorthak fleet began its journey home. Their ships transformed, but their crews still learning what it meant to be something other than conquerors. The human fleet remained to help coordinate relief efforts and to begin the long process of establishing diplomatic contact. And in a cave on a forgotten world, a dragon, her daughter, and a human guardian sat together and began planning how to heal a galaxy that had been at war for far too long. The eternal flame pulsed warmly in Marcus's chest, its light no longer contained but flowing freely through him and into the universe beyond. For the first time in eons, the galaxy had a guardian who understood that true strength came not from power over others, but from the courage to stand with them. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation had begun.